We continue the Shir in Sifais Haran, the wise sayings of Rabbi Nachman. We are now up to paragraph Teshuva, 15. Rabbi Nachman says something, and his words are hidden, a revelation of something so amazing, so intriguing, and it is worth everything to just gain this information alone. A person would honestly say that if he was created, if he lived the whole lifetime, just to learn this one bit of information, it's worth being born. We're going to reveal it now. Take it from Rabbi Nachman's words. Rabbi Nachman says, Hashem created Chachma. Hashem created wisdom. It means that wisdom comes from Hashem. Of course, when Hashem injects into a child that is born, into a human being, to a body, Hashem injects the five senses. He also injects wisdom, because a dead body has no life, has no thought. Machshava, thought and wisdom come from Hashem. Menachem says, what is this wisdom? How we define true wisdom? The answer is a very unusual statement in the Gemara. The Gemara says that where would we seek the meaning of wisdom? From the person who was classified as the wisest of all men. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, the wisest of all men. What made him most wise? The Gemara says because he knew languages. Knowing languages is no big feat. It's no big accomplishment. There are many Lahavdil Goyim who know a lot of languages too. But he knew languages that were unique. He knew the languages of animals, the languages of trees. Knowing these languages is a true wisdom. Why? What is so important that a person can talk to a cat, ask him what he had for breakfast? What could you learn from discussions with a cat? Or with birds, something for the birds. Or still further, he was so wise, he knew the languages of trees. Knowing the language of the trees, he could speak to trees. The sound of the wind rustling through the leaves is actually the voice of the trees speaking. What kind of wisdom is it to know of these languages? Rabbi Nachman says, certainly it is a wisdom. It is the top, the peak of all wisdom. The peak of all wisdom is a person, in the first chapter of Rabbi Nachman's words, the person to be able to study everything that Hashem created, everything, not just human beings, but animals, birds, fish, trees, even non-organic, inanimate objects. Study everything and to be able to learn wisdom from these items. Look at an animal. See how the animal acts. Learn wisdom from that. The Gemara says we learn how to be immaculate from a cat. The cat teaches cleanliness. We learn how to be modest, how to be pure from a dove, a pigeon. A dove will never exchange its mate for another. It is devoted for life to its own mate. And so everything that exists can teach a human being wisdom. We learn wisdom from trees, the way the leaves grow, the fact that each one stays in its own territory. Each one derives nourishment from its own roots. It does not steal from the second one, and so on. So that everything that exists exudes wisdom and waits to be studied, learned from. The greatest wisdom is that person who can study these things and learn faith from Hashem, faith in Hashem, and learn to practice that which he derives. Now, the man says here that speaking about learning from animals, what can we learn in general from animals? Greatest wisdom is, and it's a difficult effort to achieve, is for a person to learn to be like an animal. What is so good about an animal? We speak about a person who is a boor, a person who is evil as acting like an animal. Yet here we say that the greatest minor, the highest achievement is for a person to reach the level of an animal. In what way? Because an animal has no wisdom. The animal has no conceit. The animal is very simple. A person would act as simply as an animal does, with the simplicity, with the sincerity, with the simple devotion to Hashem, without looking for any tricks or any loopholes or any means of deviating from Hashem's commands. That's the greatest wisdom possible. A person to act like an animal, meaning with this pshitus, tnimis, that is the true chachma. And this, Rabbi Nachman says, we find from these psukim. Pasuk says, "Kol asher Nosson Hashem chachma bahema." Those which Hashem gave chachma bahema in them. The word bahema has the same letters as behema. Hashem gave wisdom. What is that wisdom? That a person should be like an animal in its simple form. And therefore, the pasuk says, the Gemara tells us on this pasuk, Adam uvehema teishia Hashem. We had that in the Gemara Chul, if you recall. Hashem helps and rescues man and animal. And the Gemara asks, why do we find these two close together? Hashem helps man and animal. Why put these together? The Gemara answers, Hashem helps those who are men, which means they are superior in wisdom, superior in brain power, but they act as though they were animals, meaning they are as modest, as humble, as though they had no brains whatsoever, as though they were an animal. This is the type of person Hashem helps. Of course, we can understand this well, what the Zohar Kodesh says, that note the words Adam u'behema are together. There is nothing to separate the two. Man, animal, nothing in between. A person is that close, where his humanity is as simple as that of an animal, then Teshia Hashem. Because that closeness means that he has heavenliness in him. The whole yichud of Hashem and the Shekhinah is found in this pasuk also. Adam u'behema. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Mo, Shem Mo, because Yud Kei Vav Kei B'Miboy is Mo, 45, the Gematria Adam. The Malchus is Shem Bon, the Shem Bon, which is the Malchus, the Shekhinah, is the Gematria Bon 52, Gematria Behema. So Adam Behema is the Shem Mo Ubon. That is the highest yichud possible, which stands for Kadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. Teshia Hashem. Hashem helps that person who fulfills this in a practical sense. To bring close Hashem and the Shekhinah means to bring close the mastery, the superiority of man with the simplicity of animal. This is the greatest yichud possible that a person can achieve. And then Teshia Hashem. That person Hashem will help in all his needs. And this is the wisdom that Arizal teaches us. We can learn from Behema. We find further, Arizal brings the pasuk, I am a person without knowledge. This is said by Asaf, one of the 10 composers of the Sefer Tehillim, Psalms of King David. I'm a person without knowledge, very simple, without knowledge. I am an animal, like an animal with you, Hashem. And I deal with him like an animal. The sentence of Arizal means that when I am like an animal, when I am that simple and that humble, then imoch, and then I am with you. But should I attempt to demonstrate any bit of conceit, any bit of gaius, then Hashem separates himself from the person. This, the Menachem says, is the lesson to learn from animals. A person should be zecher to be like one, no matter how smart, how wise he is. Remember that you are really very infinitely small. And if you accept that humbleness, that simplicity, you are then assured of the assistance and blessings of Hashem. Next statement says that a person is blessed, again, with a voice. Hashem blesses a person with chachma, wisdom, and our voice. We mentioned previously that if one studies carefully, he'll find there's a direct connection between each paragraph. Though they are different topics, they're directly connected. We have first the Inyan of speaks of chachma, wisdom. Chachma is the upper level of the Sfidas. And then we come now to the voice, Zaydampin. The 6 lowest Sfidas are called the Kol. Hashem endows a person with a voice. There are different types of voices. Some people have soprano-type voices, some tenor, some bass, some very harsh voices, and some soft, melodious voices. All these types of voices are normal human type of voices. But when a person speaks not to a second human, he speaks to Hashem. He speaks to Hashem in tefillah, when he prays to Hashem, then there is a different type of voice that is used. The koil tefillah, the voice of tefillah. But in tefillah itself, there are different sects whose customs differ. We find that the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov was the superior Rebbe of all the later Hasidic Rebbes, and yet, though he was one Rebbe, one teacher, his students differed in many instances. For one thing, some had the custom of davening very still, very quietly. The decorum was such you could hear a pin drop during the davening. Others, their custom was to raise their voices, to scream out to Hashem with all their might, all their power. Kol atzmeisai tamayna. Every bone in my body helps to scream out. My voice screams out to Hashem. Screams out for help, because I know how sick my soul is, how much help it needs. Therefore I cry out to Hashem, help me, assist me, cure me. Now, this voice, a person davens with, whether it is soft, whether it's very loud, this is the normal type of voice a person is endowed with. The voice works through the larynx. It originates in the lungs. From the lung there comes forth this power, the wind power, that goes through the larynx and emanates from the mouth, the hemoitzois apeh. Different sounds come from the tongue, the palate, the lips, the teeth, and the throat. This is Lady Kodesh says. 5 origins of the different letters of different sounds in the aleph base. Now this means that when the voice comes out, all these different parts are used to bring out the voice. But it originates from the lungs. Arizal says no, that a person can cry or scream a very high-pitched sound. So high-pitched, no one can actually hear the sound. And yet, it is the loudest sound any person can humanly bring out. How does a person accomplish this loud scream which is unheard? Of course, there are tubes in the lungs, and these tubes are connected with the larynx to the mouth. Therefore, when a person screams regularly, normally, the tubes bring out this wind power, and it comes out to the mouth, resulting in sound. But these tubes from the lungs also are connected in these tubes leading through the lungs up to reaching into the brain. So instead of coming out from the mouth in sound, it goes directly up to the brain where no actual physical sound is heard, yet the brain can actually picture, imagine, and feel a scream that is louder than that which is normally heard. There is an actual scream felt by the brain, and yet there's no sound heard by any person standing around one. So when a person has his prejudice, for example, he wants to speak to Hashem privately, private communion. Speaking to Hashem quietly, he doesn't feel aroused much, inspired much to daven. He feels so hurt with his present level, his present status, that he wants to cry out and scream with all his might to Hashem, but he's in public. It will be very embarrassing. The person could then scream through the brain, where his brain feels and hears this mighty sound of the scream, but no other person around him can hear this. In this way, he can give vent to his deepest heartfelt feelings with the loudest scream possible to Hashem, and let out his frustrations, scream to Hashem, and yet not to be heard by anyone. This is a very healthy type of sound, type of scream, a soundless scream, which is very effective, because in actuality, it says if you try to daven, and you speak, say the words, you'll find that your mind wanders. Why? Because you cannot attach the mikasher, the machshava, to the dibur. Attach the brain, the mind, to the words you're saying. It's very difficult to hold tightly to what you're saying. Your mind is prone to wander off into different areas, think about more pleasant items in davening. You find the Shemon Esrei, for example. But if a person screams with the brain, he is then using the brain for the sake of the scream itself. He is employing the brain completely, and the brain does not wander off into different areas. But this way, a person can actually hold tightly to the words he's saying and concentrate much more truthfully, much more fully on the actual tefillah, the prayer he's saying to Hashem. This is a very healthy status in tefillah itself. Of course, we understand this too, just to take a moment out for the interpretation of Zedek Kaddish on a much higher level. You say that the letters of Hashem's name, Yud, K, Vav, K. Yud, K is Chachma or Bina. Chachma or Bina is the brain. Chachma is the wisdom, the upper level of the brain. And Vav, K, the last two letters, Vav is the Kail, the power of the voice, and the K, Malchus, is Dibur, Malchus Peh. These four letters are four letters, yet Hashem is Echad, one. So, if one can rise to a height where he understands that Hashem is one and all four actually are integrated into one, into Echad, that person has reached a level that is unmatched, the most superior level possible. He actually brings this being, merging Hashem into one, Kaviyachol. And this is called elevating Ze'er Anpin. Ze'er Anpin is Ein Leva Chachma. The Vav goes up to and becomes absorbed by Yud K, the Chachma. And this is what the Arizal says, you mouth the Kail. The Kail extended through the mouth, the Yichud with the mouth, with Dibur, instead it goes up to Chachma, to the brain, to Machshava. So that's why this kind of a voice is so much higher than the one that emanates from the mouth physically, because it's the Kail, the Mikusha to the Machshava. So the Kail, which we said, this Kuchbinech, which is Shem Mo, the Shem Mo now goes up to and becomes Chachma. Chachma is Kayach Mo. But the Kayach, the power behind Mo, is the Chachma, from which Mo is derived, and this is the true origin of this Kail. The Kail that comes from and is attached to the Machshava, the Kayach Mo. Arizal stresses, though, again, it is very important to note that if we were to ask which is the right path, we have these different customs, ones who daven very silently, and those who daven very loud, and put power into their davening. They exert a lot of pressure, a lot of energy. When they finish davening, they're soaked. They're perspired because they put a lot of physical effort into it, which is the proper manner. Arizal says certainly what we're speaking about now is fit for his B'edidus only, or at most for Shemon Esrei. Shemon Esrei is called the Tefillah Balachash, silent tefillah where a person is not allowed to leave any sound out of his mouth. The rest must be said completely silently. No sound should come from his mouth, even for his own ears to hear. He's not supposed to hear a sound himself, even if no one else is within earshot. But the rest of the davening, up to Shemon Esrei, a person should daven tefillah b'kayach. Not to be lazy, not to sit back, but to daven, give vent to his voice. Let his voice praise Hashem. Kamed es Hashem, megirincha, from your throat, let your throat give forth the power of the kayach of the Kail. Arizal speaks next, going to the mitzvah of learning Torah. There are different ways of learning Torah also. The person who learns Torah sits down to learn, and he does it in a manner where he's just being Yetzer. He has to fulfill an obligation. Sits there very haphazardly. He reads instead of learning deeply. He covers the necessary time, and then closes the Gemara or Sefer he's learning. He's finished. He doesn't learn with a vigor, with effort put into it, where he actually enjoys the work he's doing. This is called hasmada. Hasmada means to learn with an anticipation, anxiety, feeling. The hasmada in learning is derived from a person who understands the value of learning Torah. Arizal once spoke very strongly, reprimandingly, about the inyan of learning Torah with hasmada. he said to his Talmidim, why don't you learn Torah with Kayach also? Put effort and energy into learning. What can you lose? Think to your minds what kind of an investment this is. You're investing an hour's time into the study of Torah. In this hour's time, learn with Hasmada. What do you have? For this learning, instead of spending the hour and dozing off or sleeping or doing anything else, you're going to gain Elam Haba. You're going to need Ganeden for this. Every word of Torah you learn, you have Ganeden for it. So think of the benefit, think of the reward, think of the profit you have from investment. You're investing an hour, at worst, the very worst, you'll have Ganeden for it. That's the very worst. So at least you learn for the sake of profit. Go out and earn something. Earn for this hour a big chunk of Ganeden, an hour's worth of Ganeden. On the other hand, besides this, that's the least, besides this, if you relearn with Asmada and you struggle and learn deeply, you're going to find an enjoyment, a pleasure in learning, a bliss that is not found in this entire world. There's nothing physical that can compare to the pleasure of learning a page of Gemara deeply and understanding its depth. To understand, to feel the pain of a kasha, something difficult in the Gemara, a question that first cannot be answered, then you struggle and struggle till you find the answer, and you enjoy the luxury of finding this kasha has dissipated. You now understand the answer for it. This pleasure is so great. What causes this pleasure? What's the origin of this pleasure? The Zaydi Kodesh says, this is called the Ne'imus, the pleasantness of the Torah. At first you have Meniyas. Meniyas means obstacles. You try to learn as an obstacle. You don't understand the translation, the interpretation, the logic in a statement of the Gemara. That's Meniyas, obstacles, barriers. When you struggle very hard, and you find that this Meniyas changes to Ne'imus, the pleasantness. How? Because the Torah itself, the Vedic Kodesh is like a kala, a bride, who is not yet married. And as a kala, she cannot have contact with the chassid yet. So what she does, she stays in a closed room, and she is already taken, she's betrothed, she cannot be seen by other men, so she stays in that room and waits while others pass by, the room stays closed. When a chassid passes by, she opens the door slightly for him to catch a glimpse of her, to enjoy seeing her for a moment, a fleeting moment. But this arouses in him a desire to see more of her. It gives him that pleasant sight, knowing what is in store for him ultimately. This is what the Torah does. Seek me out, the Torah says, and I'll open the door a drop. You'll understand, you'll see some of the beauty, the pleasantness of the Torah. If you continue to study the Torah, I'll open it completely, and you'll become the master of this bride. And become like a true chassan and kala, finally in wedlock, where all these secrets then are revealed. The Torah reveals of its own secrets, the Syrian Torah, to those who work and struggle to make the Torah part of himself. And this is the greatest reward a person can derive from the study of Torah. So not only does one get the Gan Eden, the reward that is due ultimately for every word of Torah, but also the deep-seated pleasure, bliss that comes with the study of Torah itself. The person enjoys every moment of going so deeply into Torah and seeing the endless depth of the wisdom of Torah. Torah says we see how important this is, how vital it is, because the Gemara says that Hashem himself, there's time created by Hashem. What does Hashem do during that time? The Gemara says that Hashem spends the time in the study of Torah himself. 3 hours every morning are devoted purely to the study of Torah. Kaviyachol. What is meant by Hashem studying Torah? We have that further explained in the Zaydi Kodesh. The Zaydi Kodesh says that there are 2 heavenly yeshivas. We have yeshivas below, schools of learning, and in heaven there are also yeshivas. There is a yeshiva called Mesifta Didikia. Mesifta means a higher school of learning. Mesifta Didikia, the yeshiva of heaven. In this yeshiva of heaven, you have the neshamas of tzadikim and the heavenly angels study under the care. The dean of that yeshiva is the Malach Mentes. This Malach Mentes, who is the Reisha yeshiva of this Mesifta Didikia, There he elaborates upon the secrets of the Torah. There, the deepest questions are asked. And at times, these questions are so difficult, there is no answer for them. What do they do when they have a question that cannot be answered, even by the Rosh Yeshiva himself, this great Menachem Test, the master Rosh Yeshiva? Then they go to the higher Yeshiva, which is called the Sifta Ilah, the heavenly Yeshiva above, the Yeshiva of Hashem. All questions that are asked below that cannot be resolved are brought to the heavenly Yeshiva of Hashem. There they are answered. So we see then that what is done in heaven, the Torah is so great and so holy, the treasure of Hashem, even Hashem himself studies the Torah. So what can you do better than to occupy yourself with what Hashem does too? Hashem studies the Torah, his treasure. Why shouldn't you too study the Torah, spend time on it, and enjoy the pleasure of learning Torah besides the ultimate eternal reward in Gan Eden? This was the advice of Rabbi Nachman. In addition, Rabbi Nachman said there's a third item that a person gains. And we know that there are certain mysteries found in Kabbalah. Kabbalah means heavenly secrets. Kabbalah means, for example, the geography of heaven, the different shapes and forms found in the heavens, the different levels of the heavens. Kabbalah means the tzirufim, the combinations of certain letters and certain words, certain geometric forms, certain numerals that form certain names, gematriyos. All these produce, ultimately, combinations that are very heavenly and holy. The Baalei Kabbalah, the masters of Kabbalah, was said to be able to perform miracles with this Kabbalah. We had a story recently where King David dug the Shittim into the depth, the waters beneath the earth, and then he reached a point where he revealed and he moved the rock that covered the core of the earth. By moving it, the earth was about to become flooded. How to stop it? It required writing the name of Hashem, a certain name of Hashem, a certain combination that would control this flood. This was part of the secrets of Kabbalah. Or, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw the Egyptian striking the Jew, the Torah says that he killed the Egyptian. What weapon did he use? He used the knowledge of Kabbalah by saying a certain name of Hashem. One of the Shem Ayin Beis, a three-lettered name, we won't mention now, but everyone knows it already. Don't try to use it on your enemies. This three-lettered name had the power, the potency of actually killing this Egyptian. This three-lettered name is part of the secrets of Kabbalah, which means that with these certain names, a person using each different name, or for instance, a certain name used by Eliyahu Navi, gave him the power of being able to travel at unusual speed through the air, to fly through the air faster than Superman, being able to reach destinations in a second in the dark without having to see. This was also the Shem used by the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov, the same name used by Yaakov Avinu, when he said, he covered great distances in no time at all. This is all by the use of the wisdom, the secrets of Kabbalah. Arizal says now, note, the secrets of Kabbalah were first revealed in the time of the Arizal. They were revealed, of course, before that, the days of Reb Shimon Yechoy, and before that by Rabbi Akiva, and by Avraham Avinu. But there was an era of hundreds of years between the time of the Tanoim, or even the Ramban, until the Arizal. During that time, the Chachmas Kabbalah was completely hidden from anyone's knowledge. No one knew Kabbalah. And yet, despite that, there were tzaddikim who were so great they could perform the same miracles as those who did with the mastery of Kabbalah. How? What was their secret? Their secret was that they studied Torah so thoroughly, with such intent, with so much kavanah, that the power of the Torah itself was vested in them. They could perform miracles. Not Kabbalah at all, just the Torah itself. So a person learning Torah receives some of this power. For example, let's take a simple example. A person, for example, would sit down to study Torah. He'd concentrate without letting his mind wander for a second, for 2 hours, 3 hours straight. When he finished, he put his whole heart and soul into this, and then he went to daven. And in davening, he asked Hashem, give me parnasa, give me money, give me health, give me a cure. Because of the fact that he worked so hard, struggled so hard in the study of Torah, he is now so filled with kedusha, with holiness, that his tefillah will be answered, his prayer will be answered, and Hashem will grant his request, even if it's a form of miracle. So we see where the power of Torah is so great that a person today too, study Torah, you have the ultimate reward in Gan Eden, you have the fact that you're doing what Hashem himself, Kaviyachud, does, you have also the fact that this will help you to have your tefillahs, your prayers answered even when a miracle is necessary. This is why Rabbi Nachman stressed so much the study of Torah in its simplest form. They got a Gemara, they got a Shulchan, they got any Sefer, but sit down and learn and devote your time with sincerity, with purity, without letting your mind wander during that time. Devote a special period of time. This is called kaviyas. The kaviyas by Torah, set aside this time, no matter how long or how short it is, but don't let that time be lost. In return, you have all the blessings mentioned by the Arizal. Arizal says, now, note, nowadays, the Arizal's time, and this of course is multiplied until now, we find that there is a new invention that came out then, known as the printing press. Where until then, books, Sfarim, were written by hand. It was very difficult to spread many books, Sfarim. You had to write by hand, at best to copy in a crude form. To have thousands of Sfarim was a very difficult item. When the printing press came out, it was a blessing. A blessing for Jews, because then they could have thousands of Sfarim. Each Jew could then own Sfarim. Each Jew could have a Shas, each Jew could have a Shulchan Aruch, he could have Chamashim, everything he needed. So the Malachas Hatfus, the magic of printing, was actually made, Rosenfeld says, for the sake of the Jew as a blessing. Because the Jew became weak as far as his memory was concerned. In the olden days, every Jew had this entire closet of Sfarim in his mind, in his brain, by heart. Then they reached the point where the brain became much weaker. Today, try and put that in your head, you find it to be a practical impossibility. Because of that, you get to have it in print. You have to read it and then try to get some of it in your head. So that's why the greatest blessing out was this invention of the printing press. Menel says that nowadays, in his time, and of course this refers to future too in our time, we find that the printing of Sfarim has increased manyfold. They are printing Sfarim in such numbers that stagger the mind. And amazing how people buy Sfarim. You see this today too. You go to any Jewish home, any religious Jewish home, you find that even though a person is not that well versed, that much of a scholar, in a large library. Every Jewish home has a Shas and a Chamashim and commentaries and Shulchan Aruch, plus Shalos and Teshuvos and different Jewish Sfarim. Some have even wall-to-wall libraries. Amazing how people buy so many Sfarim. Rosenfeld says this is very good, because you never know which sefer you look into that will suddenly inspire you. One person might read a whole sefer and find nothing that inspires him. He takes a different sefer, and this suddenly he's aroused to a new feeling of a fiery spirit, to devotion to Hashem. Second person finds inspiration in the first sefer. Each nature is different. So it's necessary to have all these Sfarim, never to say, why are there so many Sfarim? It must be because you never know which sefer will strike you, or strike a second Jew, to awaken you to a new desire to serve Hashem. Menel says, though, that what is the reason why subconsciously people buy so many Sfarim? Because the Gemara says, there'll come a time when the Torah will be forgotten from the Jews. The Torah will be forgotten, and if Torah is forgotten, of course, it's impossible to exist. You must have Torah to exist by. Because of this fear that it might be forgotten, therefore, to ensure its existence, people are buying Sforim wildly. To make sure they don't forget the Torah, they have it in their home. Arizal says this is a very serious mistake. Because what is the good of having all these Sforim in your home if you don't study Torah? If you don't learn it, the fact that it's in the closet will never penetrate to your mind. You want it in your mind. If you want to have Torah to be remembered, not forgotten, you've got to study Torah. Just keeping it in the closet alone is of no avail whatsoever. This is a universal error on the part of people who buy Sforim and figure by buying it, they now possess Torah. They don't possess Torah, they possess books, Sforim, but not Torah, not the knowledge of Torah. This takes actual study. This mistake is the mistake of Yanai, who made a fatal error. The Gemara says, recall the Gemara Kedushin, but Yanai wanted to take over he was king of the Jews, the second holy temple. He wanted to become the Kohen Gadol also, be both Melech and Kohen Gadol. The Chachamim, all the rabbis in the Gemara, protested against this, and he was stilled for a moment. But he had an advisor with him, a very evil person named Elazar ben Pa'ida. And he turned to Yanai HaMelech, this evil advisor, and said to him, Yanai HaMelech, how are you so weak? You let these rabbis, this clergy, trample over you? Why don't you show me your superiority? So he said to this evil advisor, what can I do? So he said to the king, show that you're a king by putting every one of them to death. Kill every one of the rabbis in the Gemara. He accepted this evil advice, foolishly, and he murdered every one of the rabbis of the Gemara except one, the Shimon ben Shatach, who escaped. He was the brother of Yanai's wife. She hid him because he alone remained. That one person, the Shimon ben Shatach alone, brought back the whole Torah to the Jews. Fortunately, he remained to bring back the Torah, because then there wasn't much printed. So the Gemara says that Yanai, before doing this, asked Elazar ben Pa'ida, he said, if I kill the rabbis, what's going to happen to the Torah? This evil person answered, no problem, the Torah is there in a closet. You have these Sforim, you have the Chamoshim there, it's safe. Whoever wants it can come on it. The Gemara said this was his mistake, because what is the good of the Sforim there if a person doesn't study it? What is the good of the Chamoshim there? You haven't got the rabbis to elaborate, to comment, and to bring out the secrets of the Gemara, the Talmud, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. This was Yanai's error, and this is the error of those people who buy a lot of Sforim, put it in their closet for show, but never bother to take it out and to study it. What is the good of a sefer if it lies in the closet, the book closet, bookshelves, without being used? The Torah will be forgotten if it is not used. Buying it alone is not sufficient. A person should, of course, buy Sforim. It's a mitzvah to buy Sforim. But then to use these Sforim constantly, to study the Torah, because then he'll be assured that it will not be forgotten. His home will remain a home of Torah, despite the fact that there is this decree that the rabbis will be forgotten. This, of course, brings us back to the Shimon Yehoyazal's Avtocha. Yehoyazal said, despite this harsh decree by the rabbis of the Gemara saying, the prediction that the Torah will be forgotten eventually, I assure that the Torah will always remain. Why? Because in the schus of the Zohar Kodesh, this will be the one light. Zohar means light. This will be the guiding light of the Torah. Will bring back all Torah to the Jews. The privilege of being able to learn the secrets of the Zohar Kodesh will be so great that it will bring about an appetite, a desire to learn much more Torah. We find today that those people who taste from the sweetness, the honey of Reb Shimon Yehoyazal's words in the Zohar Kodesh, they appreciate much more the sweetness of the words of Torah. There is a difference between Chassidim and the opposite. Arizal goes on further to say, the same topic, my strongest desire, Arizal said, is to be able to draw with magnetic power, to draw people, draw my students, to draw others to action. Action means not to be lazy, to go about, to exert energy, to study Torah. Simply to use their physical power in studying Torah. sit down and struggle and work. Or the same thing applies to davening. You daven, put koyach, power into it. And the benefit here, the Arizal says, is you can get a person, a Jew who has fallen, chas v'sholem, into sin. And sometimes he's fallen into sin so badly that this sin becomes habit. And when sin becomes habit, this becomes nature. So that his actual nature is that he commits sins by force of habit and nature. The person does that, you cannot remove him from this nature. It's his nature itself. You can't stop a person from eating. So a person who's fallen that far, how do you cure a person's nature to commit sins? And the one cure is by the study of Torah, the kviyas. You establish a set time to learn Torah, and by keeping this time sacred, never allow this time to go lost, you will find that this will be the key to remove a person from this nature and habit of sin. Because he eventually becomes so strong that he'll actually break his nature, break his habit, and go back to Kedusha, go into the habit and nature of mitzvahs rather than sins. Same thing too pertains to tefillah. A person who davens without any special tricks, without any special ruses, who davens simply, takes every word, simple translation, and puts his feeling into it, a person like that too can find that he'll break the shackles, the bonds, the chains that keep him tied to the wrong side of the track, to sin. By davening strongly with koyach, a person can free himself of this slavery of sin, of the Yitzhahara, the Satan, and find himself now free to devote his time to serve Hashem. The key to learning Torah and davening, of Arizal says, the only key is through simcha. A person who has true simcha, who's always been simcha, who never allows himself to go into depression of mind, that person can daven with much more purity, can learn Torah better, because simcha is a key through which a person can then speak to Hashem privately. In spite of this is possible only through simcha. A person that has simcha, he can turn to Hashem then out of simcha and speak to Hashem with a broken heart. A broken heart still comes from simcha, because a broken heart means one that is pure. A person who feels happy over the fact that I can break my heart before Hashem and plead with Hashem. A person who has atzvus, sadness, depression of mind, cannot daven with kavod. He can't speak to Hashem. His mind, his heart is clogged. So therefore the key throughout is simcha. Arizal says that simcha is the one means of getting close to Hashem. In addition, besides all the other facts, all the facts about the benefits of simcha, how great the mitzvah is, above all, Arizal says a person who's always been simcha. Remember, a person who's always been simcha, the reward is that Hashem Himself will guard that person against chilul abedis. Hashem will guard him and protect him to be zecher tikkun abedis, which is the highest level of human being can reach. And this can be done through simcha, because with simcha he is close to Hashem. This is the means of getting to emunah, the means of actually attaching himself to Hashem, serving Hashem properly. This is the main item we should learn, because Arizal stressed this point, mitzvah gedolah leis b'simcha Torah. It's a major mitzvah to be b'simcha always, and this item we must take very strongly to heart. You cannot claim to accept Arizal's words unless you prove by being b'simcha always. The key always is, are you b'simcha? The answer must be very strongly the affirmative. I am, because I believe in Arizal's words. We should be zecher b'yemes, truly, to accept this advice of Arizal fully. That to be b'simcha always, and through simcha to devote our time to the study of Torah, to daven Hashem with true kavanah, and through simcha to be able to become b'nei chayden, free to really serve Hashem, fulfill all His mitzvahs, and to become a true nation of Hashem, and thereby to merit seeing this coming month of Nisan, and Geula Shlema, becoming a Mashiach Tikuney, being a Mikdash and Heda, Amen. We continue the Shir Sichos Hanan. Rabbi Arizal saying we are now on paragraph Chaf Aleph 21. We've covered 20 so far, Baruch Hashem. Every one of these sayings, of course, are gems. We cannot really elaborate on them properly. Rabbi Arizal said, though, every person is permitted to learn his words in as much or as little depth as he can. As much as we learn now, we hope that it's Hashem, Elam Haba, will be zecher to understand much more. Rabbi Arizal says in this statement that Rosh Hashanah is the main holiday of the year in the eyes of the tzadik, in the eyes of Rabbi Arizal, meaning that those who are attached to Rabbi Arizal can gain more on Rosh Hashanah than any other time of the year. Those who come to Rabbi Arizal's minyan, Rabbi Arizal's kibbutz, the assembly, can gain much more than any other time. Because of the fact that Rosh Hashanah is the most important time of the year, a person should be very wise, at least to the best of his ability, to use his mind during Rosh Hashanah for a good cause. Good cause is to concentrate his mind on the fact, the machshava, the thought should be like a tefillah, like a prayer itself. The thought should be a tefillah to concentrate, to bring about a Yeshua, a victory for the Jews from heaven on this day of judgment. It's a time when everything occurs, decisions are made in heaven for every individual, for every nation collectively, so that a person through deep concentration can affect a cure and a Yeshua, a victory from heaven on that day. A person who thinks deeply is the same as though he davens deeply. He attaches his mind to heaven and, in a sense, can actually become part of the heavenly tribunal. He becomes like a judge on that court and can make decisions. Just as a person who davens, his tefillah alone can affect a heavenly decision, especially if he becomes attached closely to the tzadik emes on that day. And as the fact is, the tzadik emes not only davens, but also can decree. He can make a statement, he can dictate, and kaviyachal Hashem fulfills. The person attached to the tzadik emes, besides davening, also uses his machshava. What's important about the machshava is that, in effect, in the level of kedusha, machshava, thought, is even higher than tefillah. Because tefillah is bepeh, malchus. Machshava is the chachma, which at the same time, Rabbi Arizal says, must be, the catch is it must be besimcha. The word machshava is the letters besimcha, exactly the same letters, and therefore, using machshava as Hashanah means a person should be besimcha then, to feel that though this is the day of judgment, though his life hangs in the balance, on this day there is written down and inscribed in the book of life and health, there is inscribed this person's name, the decision is made to which book he'll be in. Despite the danger, the jeopardy he is in, still he is besimcha, and with this simcha, he can have the heavenly decree changed. In addition, Rabbi Arizal says a person should see to it that he sheds tears on the Shoshana. You don't just daven, but you put your heart into it, because machshava too is belief in the heart. Concentrate with the heart, and a person should cry in the deep recesses of his heart. In fact, we mentioned once that Arizal states clearly that on Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, a person should cry during davening. And if he does, it shows that he has a soft, good heart. If he does not cry, it's a bad sign, chas v'shalom. It shows that he has a heart of stone. A heart of stone, a heart that is harsh and inflexible, is the exact opposite of Breslov. Because the opposite of the leiv evan, the heart of stone, is leiv basar, a heart of flesh. Leiv basar is the letters Breslov. And this is what Arizal says. Arizal, of course, naturally was a Breslover. Arizal said that a person on Rosh Hashanah, again the most important day, should cry, and this shows a softness of heart, and this shows that his tefillah is being accepted. Also, Rabbi Arizal said, and this is something which is taken very seriously by the followers of Rabbi Arizal, and on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, a person should be wise in that he keeps his mouth shut. A person should speak as little as possible on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. The first day, of course, is Dina Kashya. It's the harsher one of the dinim. If he keeps his mouth closed, he does not speak words that are unnecessary. Of course, it is open to daven. It's open to learn. But not to speak to any person any words that are unnecessary. Then he becomes a whole keli, a pure vessel, filled with pure thoughts, without wrong deeds, without wrong words. He completes himself. Rabbi Arizal says the greater the person is, the less he should speak. And therefore, Rabbi Arizal himself was medactic, particular. On Rosh Hashanah, he did not even say the payat, parts of the davening that are added on Rosh Hashanah. He skipped those parts. He considered that as superfluous. The only parts that he said were those that were composed by Rabbi Eliezer HaKaliah. Eliezer HaKaliah or Rabbi Eliezer HaKaliah, one of the two Tejas says that this is possibly Rabbi Shimon Yochai's son who composed these payat, the bits that are added during the tefillah. These are said, of course, by the Ashkenazim. Sephardim don't have that in the Machzor, but it is not for us to skip that payat. Arizal was so great at tzadik he could skip most of it and say only the selected parts. For us, it is better, of course, to say everything that is written in the Machzor, but to speak as little as possible. Therefore, there is an excellent custom, wonderful custom by most of the Breslova, that on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, they declare a tainus dibur. Just as there is a fast, people do not eat, so is there a tainus dibur, people fast from speech. They go through the entire period, from the night of Rosh Hashanah beginning, until the second night, until after Mar of the second night, without saying a word. It is as though they cannot speak. They are stricken dumb. And this, of course, is better even than a fast from food. This is following the advice of Rabbi Arizal, ashrei to the person who can fulfill this. It's good to mention, noteworthy to mention, let's give credit where credit is due, the Sephardim have regular fast days of dibur during the year. This is a wonderful item, and it is certainly advisable for any person that can do that. Because to fast from speech, just as fasting from food, Rabbi Arizal says, is the best cure, the best nourishment for the soul. The less the body eats, the more the soul is nourished. The more the body gorges itself, the more is subtracted from the soul. So too, and much more so, the more words that a person speaks that he's not supposed to. Words, of course, does not mean words of Torah and Tefillah. Regular words, the word of Metalon word, or Divrei Chayil, those words are taken from the koyach, the power of the neshama, of the nefesh. The nefesh is the power of speech, nafsho malva. But a person who refrains from speaking gives that much more power to the nefesh, to the neshama. So especially then on the holiest day of the year, the Shoshana, the day of judgment, the day in which a person's fate is decided for the rest of the year, and of course it is very advisable to give more strength to the neshama, that the neshama shall be healthy for the entire coming year. Menachem says now in the next statement, it is very good means that it is far above our conception, far above any other thing that the person can find that is good in this world, is a person to be zecher, to be very closely attached to the tzadik emes. To be closely attached means to become part of this tzadik emes. Closely attached means that a person should be actually part of the tzadik emes, to merge into one, to become one with the tzadik emes, meaning that the tzadik emes should consider him as part of himself. And why is this so important, aside from other considerations? The Arizal says, because there will come a time, this is a revelation, there will come a time when this world will come to an end, when it will come to a frightening end, to a certain degree. What will happen then will be something resembling an earthquake, a very serious universal earthquake, where the entire world will be shaken up. Now, there is a posek, Le'achois b'kanfei sa'oretz. Pasuk says, Hashem will take hold of the corners of the earth, and the yin aru rishoyim imena. The Rishon, the wicked, will be shaken off. He'll shake up the earth, the globe, and the Rishonim who cling to the earth will be forced to leave their grasp, let go of the earth, and fall off into their doom. This will take place in whatever form Hashem will do it. Of course, we say holding on to the corners of the earth. This is a very important point which we don't have time to discuss now, but it is discussed in Kabbalah when we say that the world is round. The word kanfes is used, corners. Corners generally means something which is square. In fact, the Zohar Kodesh says the world is round, and the Zohar Kodesh is written before Columbus was born. So that we knew, the Gemara too mentions very clearly that the world is kaduni, round, in a sense oval shape, so that there actually would seem there are no corners. Yet there is something about the world having corners. In other words, the roundness of the earth is not actually smooth. There are points to the earth, places where one could grasp hold of it, theoretically speaking. Someday we'll take that topic more in detail, explaining the difference of kanfes, because this refers to the union of tzitzis and the union of mesef. Now this, here the Arizal says that the time will come, Hashem will take hold of the earth and will shake it up so that the people who are wicked will fall off the earth. That means they'll be destroyed. However, one who is zechet to be kiruv, close to a tzadik emes, and will hold on tightly to the tzadik emes, that person will remain in perfect condition. He will not be shaken off at all with the wicked, since he holds on to the tzadik emes, who cannot be shaken off because the tzadik emes is the foundation of the earth itself. Tzadik yesod olam, he is the world itself. And therefore, one holding on to the tzadik emes, that close, will remain unshaken and will remain in perfect condition. Kayim. The Rosenfeld, once hearing this, said to Rabbi Arizal, how does one remain? I'd like to be close to you. Rabbi Arizal said, I have you already. I've put you into a sack. I've already captured you as mine. Rosenfeld cried out to Rabbi Arizal, please tie that sack so tightly I couldn't get out. Because as long as the person is alive, the person walks a very tight rope. Even those who think that they have perfect faith, perfect emunah in Hashem, emunah in the Torah, emunah in the tzadik emes, they think so. And yet the time comes, Chas v'sholom, many people who've got this alleged, seemingly solid faith, suddenly they become weak. And suddenly they drop Chas v'sholom. They drop their belief, they even drop their religion, they fall away. You've seen this happen very often, these casualties in this war. Life is a constant war with the Satan, with the Yitzhahara, with the angel of evil. In this battle there are many casualties. Woe is to that person who is a casualty during his lifetime. That means he falls away. He was sure of himself, but found later that he was not that strong. He did not fight hard enough. He let himself go. He fell into a lethargy, a semi-stupor, asleep, and he was taken up, defeated by the Satan. Ashrei, fortunate, blessed is that person who remains solid in his stand against the Satan, whose emunah and faith is unwavering. There are not many whose emunah is that pure. Ashrei to those who are, and of course, the basis, the yesod emunah, is the yesod tzadik. A person who is mekudev to the tzadik emes stands a much better chance of retaining his solid faith in the Torah and Hashem. Even then, even with that, person must fight constantly his battle against becoming weak in his faith. There are many forces against him. Arizal explains that the tzadik emes is like a magnet. He has a magnetic force that draws a person to him. Very simple. If you let your mind go, you don't battle it, you'll find yourself drawn to the good side. But then, there is the koyach hamachliach, the repelling force. Against the magnetic force, there's a repelling force that draws a person away from Kedusha, away from the tzadik emes, away from the Beis HaMikdash, which is called the Mishkan. Mishkan is Meshech, Moshchini, the magnetic force of the Mishkan, which draws all things that are holy to it. This koyach hamachliach, the opposite repelling force, are in most cases not just the Malach himself, Satan, but are individual people who themselves are atheists and skeptics and reforms and all types of poisoned minds who cannot sit still, who work on trying to draw people away from faith, chas v'shalom. And this is the constant battle a person must go through, to repel this repelling force and to allow himself to be taken closer to the tzadik emes through the holy magnetic force. Therefore, the Menachem says, Temiyah, it is very good one who is zeicher. It's a very big schus, a very big privilege for a person to be zeicher, to be really and truly close to and tied to the tzadik emes. A person can accomplish this if he remains alert throughout his lifetime. Never let yourself fall into a semi-sleep, because if you stop concentrating for a minute, then that might be the trap the Satan is looking for. This is a call for alertness. A person should always remember this point. This is the aside, this is the foundation upon which a person's life as a Jew and religion is based. Next statement, Arizal says, there is the item, the characteristic of pity. A person has pity on those who are unfortunate, those who are stricken with poverty, with sickness, and those, of course, who suffer various types of yisurim, suffering, misfortune of any kind, which this world is filled with. Very few in this world really enjoy the Selam Hazard. So a person seeing all this suffering and all the pity there is on those who suffer, tries his best to exclude himself from the group of sufferers. He strives day and night to become wealthy, to acquire a lot of good fortune so he can be independent and not to have to go through the suffering of the layman, of the peasant type of people, the lower class. What does a person do? He has pity on himself too. He doesn't want himself to fall into this lower category. But he forgets that if there is Rahmanas, pity on those who are unfortunate in this world, imagine the pity there is on those who are suffering poverty in the future world, in heaven. What kind of poverty exists there? Poverty means a person who lacks food and one who lacks clothing. The person here is destitute. He's very poor, abject poverty, then he could be helped. Because at worst, you give him a few cents, he can buy some food and drink, he won't starve to death. At worst, you can collect old clothes for him, he doesn't have to go bare. He can still put on some type of clothing. But there, Arizal says, and Arizal, of course, is the greatest expert in the true knowledge of what's doing in Elam Haba, in heaven. After a person passes away, he comes to heaven. There, in heaven, there are people, too, who are starving and who go completely bare of clothing. Now, them, it is the greatest pity, yet it is impossible to have pity upon them. Meaning it's impossible to help them. It's too late for them. These people who go there without clothes, there's no way to make collections for them, to buy them new clothes, because there's no way to have pity. And we know that as a fact, even from the name of Hashem. Hashem, the 13 characteristics, the meanings of Hashem, Ki Rachum, V'chanan, Hashem, the merciful, the kind, the pitiful. Hashem who has so much kindness that he's willing to overlook all the transgressions and crimes that a person can accumulate in a lifetime, if a person repents. There is no limit to the infinite mercy of Hashem. But that mercy, Hashem of mercy, is only while a person is alive. The moment a person passes away, that mercy comes to an end. Then there is Hashem of vengeance, and Hashem who pays. Hashem pays reward to the tzadik, and Hashem avenges the evil acts of the wicked. There's no mercy or kindness in the heavenly court at all. There it is purely din. In heaven the halacha is like the Shammai, we follow the din, and not the chesed, not the kindness of Rahman and pity. So there, it's impossible to have pity on a person who has no clothes or has no food. The Arizal explains what is meant by no clothes and no food. Because there a person tries to give someone assistance. They see a neshama who's bare of clothes. And these neshamas who lie there outside of the inner circle, outside of the gates of Gan Eden, they lie there screaming, very bitter scream, give us something to eat. And others come to them and say, here's food and drink. Eat to your fullest content. And these poor souls reply, no, definitely not. This is not the food that we want. We need the food and drink of Teda and Tefillah. Teda is food, of Teda, and drink is Tefillah. This is what we are lacking. We have not accumulated enough. We have not learned enough Teda during our lifetime. And if we haven't got Teda and Tefillah in our lifetime, we don't have the food and drink that is necessary in heaven. The spiritual food and drink that a person can acquire only through Teda and Tefillah. So too, there are people lying in heaven, freezing, without the neshama that's bare of clothes. And they scream in pain, give us something to cover ourselves with. Because there is no greater pain and suffering, worse than the fires of Gehenna, is the suffering of embarrassment. There's nothing greater than a person being embarrassed, chas v'shalom, before the heavenly realm. They say we are so embarrassed with our clothes, give us something to cover ourselves. And some people come to them and say, here's a load of clothes, all types, the best clothes. And they cry out, we cannot use these clothes. But we need clothes that are created through mitzvahs and good deeds only. A person cloaks himself in heaven with the mitzvahs and good deeds he's done during his lifetime. Therefore, the Arizal says there is no way to help these people. One who is left there, unclothed, there, without food, without clothes, woe is to that soul who is so barren, so isolated, and suffers continuously. Again, Arizal says, unless there is an exception. No one can help that person. You cannot offer him clothes because that's not the clothes he needs. You cannot offer him Teda mitzvahs. You cannot offer him Maisim Tevim, good deeds, because that's only possible to acquire during his lifetime here. But again, there is one who has this unusual power, this heavenly power. This is the tzadik emes. The tzadik emes, the key to it is, if a person during his lifetime has had this solid emunah, this faith in the tzadik emes, to the point where he actually merged with the tzadik emes. Merged means they became one. One means one mind only. And that is the mind of the tzaddik. The person says, I have no thought of my own, I have no mind of my own, I have no opinion of my own. I accept completely, implicitly the words of the tzaddik emes, without question at all. This is what's meant by merging and becoming one. A person like that, the tzaddik has the right, a privilege, the power in heaven to give of his own clothes, the many he possesses, give of his own clothes, his own food and drink to those that are part of him. So in heaven, there too, one who is there to become close to a tzaddik emes can then run to the tzaddik emes and receive from him a cloak to cover himself, to clothe himself, and thereby completely avoid, chas v'shalom, the worst type of suffering, the embarrassment there. Also to receive the Teda mitzvahs, Teda and Tefillah, which will give him nourishment in the heavenly realm. Arizal says still, Ashrei to that person who is zecher on this earth to prepare himself. You need food. Ashrei to those who are zecher to eat chapters of Mishnayos, Gemara. Those who are zeichet to drink afterwards, chapters of Tehillim, Psalms of King David. Those who are zeichet to cloak themselves with mitzvahs. The person at times is very particular about the suit he buys, about the coat he buys. It must be the right style, the right color, the right fit. He's very meticulous about the different details in the garments. He goes to a special store where they have many floors. He can choose from different rooms. Luxurious clothes, the texture, the fabric must be exact. He doesn't think that there's a different type of a garment that's much more important. Pay yourself with a garment that's exact when you do a mitzvah. You're particular about the mitzvah. You see that you get children that are just so. You get tzitzis that are the right size. You get mezuzahs which are not the run-of-the-mill mitzvah, but one that's carefully inspected by the right type of expert. You do mitzvahs when you sit and learn with a hasmada, with a relish, with a thirst. These mitzvahs are the kind that prepare a person with the nourishment and clothes that are necessary in Olam Haba. To crown all this, in addition, with the solid emunah and tzadik emes, that person then knows that he has something to look forward to forever afterwards. Now, in the Zayda Kodesh, on this same topic, we find Zayda Kodesh says that it's mentioned too in the Gemara, very lightly, that there is more than one Gan Eden. There is a Gan Eden below, there is a Gan Eden above, just as there is a Gehenna below and a Gehenna above. Below and above, of course, still means not the physical world. Below means the spiritual world, but there is a low spiritual world, there is an upper spiritual world. Just as there is a Shekhinah below, there's Shekhinah above. Just as the letters of Hashem's name, Yud, K, Vav, K, the first letter Hey stands for Bina, which is an upper world, Elam HaBriya. Last letter Hey is the Elam HaSiyah, a lower world. 2 levels of the Spirit of Hashem. So too, in all of Kedusha, you find the different levels. So that there is a Gan Eden below this Elam HaSiyah, naturally a spiritual world, one made for spirits, made for the nefesh, lower part of the soul. There is a Gan Eden, an upper Gan Eden for the upper part of the soul. Now, these Gan Edens for a person to get to, again, it requires that requires special kind of dress. You have exclusive places where people enter. They require you to be dressed with special type of clothes, formal clothes, dress that is fit for a higher class of people. A certain type of garment is necessary too in this Gan Eden. The lower Gan Eden requires a garment that is made of mitzvahs, maasiyos, deeds. Just as we find in the Sfidas. The 10 Sfidas correspond, 2 divisions are the 3 upper ones, Gimel Elyonim, correspond to the mind, different parts of the brain. The Zayin Tachtena, the 7 lower ones, correspond to the body, or the organs of action, deeds. Therefore, the lower Gan Eden, in order to receive a malbush, a garment there, requires mitzvahs that are done with action. The upper Gan Eden, a person is zecher to get to the upper Gan Eden, there to have a malbush requires mitzvahs that are done with a person's mind. A person's mind means mitzvahs that are done with emunah, thoughts of emunah, thoughts above all, as Zayda Kodesh says, of kisufim. Kisufim means a person who craves. He craves to become pure, to become closer to Hashem. He has a strong desire that propels him, it leads him on, it drives him on to do more mitzvahs, even if he does not succeed, but that driving force, propelling force in a person's mind. The desire itself is the most precious item of it. And the kudas ha-kesef. The soul itself is created and strengthened. This kesef, this silver which is pure, white, pure, which means kisufim is desire. This craving desire for kedusha, for holiness. This desire alone, there's no action involved, just desire alone, creates a garment that is much purer, much higher than the garment created by mitzvahs itself. This is the malbush that's needed for the Gan Eden Ha'ayin. The highest Gan Eden in which the great tzaddikim enter. They received their garments, their admission through this kisufim. The HaKadosh said that with all the struggle that he had in life to reach that highest point possible, where he could actually visit the highest realm of heavens, above the Elam HaTzilus. The greatest single item that helped him to rise to this highest point was this kisufim, this desire, and the simcha, done with simcha, with the happy thought that he is able to serve Hashem. He's able to strive, to want to serve Hashem. That's why we speak about the most important moment that exists. Shabbos afternoon, the moment of the istalkus of Moshe Rabbeinu, is called the Raiva the Raiva. Ratzayin Shebet Tzonis. The desire of desires, the strongest point of desire. A person comes so close that with desire alone he can actually become part of body and soul merge into one and become part of the Shekhinah again. Now, of course, Zohar Kodesh adds to this point that to explain a little what's meant by the garment of heaven, a person wearing a garment of heaven. Why does a person need a heavenly garment? Zohar Kodesh says, very simply, we know that the twain shall never meet. You cannot have heaven and earth meet or become one. There is a definite difference between the spiritual and the physical. Now, for example, the angels in heaven are spiritual. As far as we are concerned, they are invisible. We cannot really describe the looks, the appearance of an angel in heaven. Something which is invisible, spiritual, cannot be described in a physical term. And yet there are times when these angels in heaven descend to earth. For example, Eliyahu Navi. Other types of angels. Or, let's even say, in the case of the Zohar Kodesh tells of tzaddikim. Those tzaddikim who passed away, went to Gan Eden, and came back to earth to visit for various reasons. Many tzaddikim mention the Zohar Kodesh, or even the Gemara. When they come to earth to visit, even Eliyahu Navi himself, when they come to earth, it is impossible for them, any one of them, to come down to earth in a spiritual form, in the same form as they are in heaven. That is an impossibility. When they move to this dimension of earth, physical, they must don, they must guard themselves with a physical malbish, physical cloak, which means a body. You cannot have an angel appearing here on earth in an angelic form. And that's why. Arizal says this is the secret and the words, the truth about the words of Yaakov Avinu, Vayovek Ish Imai. Yaakov Avinu wrestled with an angel. It says Yovek Ish. Ish means a male, a man, a physical person. The angel came in the form of a physical person. What did Yaakov Avinu see? He saw a man, not an angel. The angel came in this form because he could not come to earth. He could not materialize unless he was in the cloak of a man. Same thing too. A person who is Zohar, a tzadik going to heaven, could not rise to heaven in his physical form. This was the reason why Eliyahu Navi, when the time came for him to pass away, not to die, but to leave earth and go to heaven temporarily, because he was destined to come down to earth constantly to visit, to appear at the homes of tzaddikim. Many times they mention the Gemara, of course, the case of a bris. Every bris has the Navi there. In that case, then, he had to retain his body, his physical body. And he could not be buried on earth. There was no burial for him. So what was to be done with that body? The Zohar Kodesh says that that's why he went into a fiery chariot, a chariot of fire, which when it rose upwards, when it came to a certain part of the stratosphere, or beyond, before it came to the heavens, the fire burnt away the physical part of the body and released the neshama, the soul. It did not destroy that body, though. It just separated the two. That body remained suspended somewhere, not in earth, of course, but just at this dividing point. Whenever there is a descent by Eliyahu Navi, he first cloaks himself in this physical body and then comes to earth. He cannot appear on earth without the physical form, as can no angel. And therefore we can understand now that when a person, a tzadik, goes to heaven, then who the tzadik is. In the case of the Arizal, where he's told that he visited heaven so often. The Baal Shem Tov visited heaven constantly. When he came to heaven, he did not come in his physical form. We read stories about him going through the different various parts of heavens or Gan Eden. He was not there in a physical form. That is impossible. Nothing physical can ever reach the heavens. There had to be this separation where the soul left the body to a degree, of course, leaving over a slight part of the kista de chiyusa. A small percentage of the soul remains in the body to keep it still alive. It's not dead yet. And the main part of the soul rises up to heaven, and that's the part that visits heaven. It must be in the form of a soul, and there's already Kodesh says before it enters to heaven, it must cloak itself in the heavenly garb. And this is what's meant by the necessity for the mitzvahs, Ma'asim Tevim, Teda and Tefillah, for a person to be zecher to have these clothes and nourishment. That's what the Arizal said, Ashrei to the person who eats and drinks and cloaks himself in Teda and Tefillah and mitzvahs. Ashrei to that person is zecher to ensure a definite success in heaven by his merging, his being a kuda, mikusha to the tzadik emes. Menachem says, too, that aside from becoming merged with the tzadik emes, there is an unusual, priceless value, privilege, in one who is zecher to give money to the tzadik emes. It is so great and so precious that it's immeasurable. Now, we know that money itself can buy a lot of things. Money can buy a great deal, but money cannot really buy spiritual. Money, of course, would stuck a person into mitzvahs. But you can't buy your way to Gan Eden. You cannot buy a room in Gan Eden for a certain price. You cannot buy off, bribe. You cannot bribe a judge, an honest judge. You surely cannot bribe a tzaddik. How can you give a tzaddik money and thereby bribe him to accept you as one of his? In a form that says to be a form of bribe. Menachem says that to give money to a tzaddik emes, factually, is so great a privilege, so great an accomplishment, that the person then deserves not just the thanks of the tzaddik emes, he deserves a very special commendation from heaven, from Hashem. Because kaviyachol, it means if we're allowed to use that term, kaviyachol, he is actually, in a sense, doing a favor to both Hashem and the tzaddik emes by giving the tzaddik emes money. Menachem explains this in a sense, in a moshel. There is a king and a prince, a father and son, who are estranged, are very distant from each other, and they both simultaneously have that, struck with that sudden feeling of longing and yearning for each other. They both begin to travel towards each other, and they cannot travel fast enough because there's a limit to how much speed they can make. And in this traveling, the closer they become, the stronger the yearning becomes too, until they feel they may actually pass out or pass away from the strong desire. It's as though their soul wants to leave them with desire. Then they realize that what is the sense of going to such a risk with the strong desire that may cause death possibly. They decide then that they have other things to do. The king says, I have other business to take care of. The son says, let me take care of other things too. This desire is overwhelming, and it's dangerous. So I'll forget about this. There isn't the chance of getting close to my father in time before I pass away. Let's forget about it. Suddenly, along comes a person with a flying chariot, picks up the son, puts him on his wagon, and flies at tremendous speed and brings him close to the father. So quickly, he's shocked by the speed. He finds himself suddenly in the arms of his father. Imagine the reward that is due for this person from the king. The thanks from the son, the prince, because he has brought these two together, who thought that it was impossible. Menachem says that here too, the tzaddik has this yearning for Hashem, to get close to Hashem. He keeps moving closer, and the closer he becomes, you have to understand that the kisufim alone are enough. When the soul desires to become part of the spiritual, there's always a danger of a person is having his soul leave him. For example, you have the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. Kriyas Shema means you say Shema Yisrael, and the true mitzvah is a person is supposed to think, imagine, actually at the time, enact this, feel that he's about to die for the sake of his faith in Hashem. This is the true way of saying Shema Yisrael. You have to Hashem Lekecha. You should love Hashem b'chol avavcha, b'chol nefshecha, with your whole heart and with your soul, with your life. And even though my life is taken, I still have this implicit faith in Hashem. The true Kriya Shema is to say this with such a feeling, with fervency, as though you're about to die for your religion, for your faith. Now, a tzadik who says that with a true feeling, Menel says there is always a danger that his soul just might leave him, because he might feel the actual experience of death and accept it gladly, and this would stop his life. Of course, it is not worth losing his life, and he could continue to serve Hashem later. So the tzaddik feels this too at this time of yearning, that there is a barrier between himself and Hashem. He cannot get close enough for various reasons, obstacles that are in the way, but his desire is so strong that he feels there is a danger. Why spend time with the desire alone? Let me do other mitzvahs instead. Let me concentrate on learning Torah, on davening, on putting on tefillin, doing other mitzvahs. Hashem too, Kaviyachal, has this desire for the tzaddik to stand close to him, and Hashem sees that, of course, Hashem is all-powerful, but he does not use his power against the privilege given to human beings, the free choice. So Hashem says, I want the tzaddik as close to me too, but it's, in a sense, it's that difficult that we'll have to leave it go for a while. Let me take care of my other items that I'm occupied with. I have a whole world that comes up to take care of, a realm of heaven, countless angels. Why only the tzaddik emes? Kaviyachal, of course, this is a very delicate topic. It's difficult to speak about this in the physical sense. Now, along comes this person and gives the tzaddik emes a large amount of money, which removes any possible barrier, physical barrier that he has. He's got problems with his family, he's got financial problems, he's got health problems which require money to soothe. When this money is given to the tzaddik emes, all the barriers are removed, he's free then to soar upwards and come close to Hashem quickly. This person who has done this mitzvah, imagine what kind of reward he receives from Hashem. You have brought my most desirable son close to me. Imagine the schar there is for that. Now again, the mushal, the nimshal, the example given, the nimshal, what this stands for is something that we cannot really explain in the physical sense. We cannot explain what's meant by Hashem having this strong desire, by the tzaddik having this yearning, which cannot become materialized till there is money given. Though we do not understand this in the full sense, but we do understand and know. Arizal's words about the importance of giving money to the tzaddik emes is that great, but it does somehow actually bring the tzaddik emes closer to Hashem. And imagine that when a person can do something for the tzaddik emes, kaviyachol for Hashem, what that person is accomplishing. So in this case then, we know there are mitzvahs that are far beyond our conception and importance. It's our duty only to accept them with faith. It is that important, ashay to those who are zeichet to give money then. That's why we can now understand the words of Rabbi Nachman who said that the mitzvah of tzedakah is immense, one of the most important mitzvahs of the Torah, one of the basic mitzvahs of a Jew. And yet, the mitzvah of tzedakah is so diversified that a person who has money can sometimes squander it wrongly. Give to the wrong kind of tzedakah, you don't gain, you lose. The Gemara says there's a curse upon some people that they are given a lot of wealth, and they are cursed from heaven that their wealth goes to the wrong place, even when they intend to give tzedakah. That person who is zeichet to find the right place for tzedakah to the tzaddik emes, with a little bit can accomplish much more than those with a tremendous amount. Arizal said that if you know, you understand the value of tzedakah to the tzaddik emes, know how to invest this. Ashrei to that person who can invest for the sake of the tzaddik emes, the yeshiva of the tzaddik emes, the sfarim of the tzaddik emes, the Torah of the tzaddik emes, much more, infinitely more than any other type of tzedakah out. This is what is revealed to us, and this is what we should be zeichet to fulfill. All these words of advice of Rabbi Arizal, if we are zeichet to fulfill them, then surely we'll be deserving of the brachos mentioned in the Torah by Rabbi Arizal, especially to be deserving of seeing the coming of the tzaddik emes himself together with Moshiach Tikuney Zohar in this month of Nisan, the month in which we are promised will come forth the Gula Shlema. We'll see with our eyes the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, the downfall and destruction of all the enemies of the Jews, and the rebirth of the Jews as a nation under Hashem. Amen.